Mr. Christia, your background, one bracelet he built, Facebook was big print slides for using virtual White House photos of you and the device transferred, so the pack of also promising access to...
The clock reads 2:40. A decision has already been made, and the consequences are already in motion. In Washington, confidence is projected, but beyond the statements, the situation tells a different story. A presidency that promised to end wars is now surrounded by escalation, and what was once framed as deterrence begins to look like something else entirely. The order was clear: 20,000 troops placed on combat readiness, not symbolic, not rotational, operational, immediate. Across multiple bases, units began mobilizing within hours. Transport trucks rolled in, barracks emptied. Gear was loaded with mechanical precision. Each soldier carried more than equipment. They carried uncertainty. The destination was the Middle East. The timeline? Undefined. This wasn't a drill. This was force projection at scale. And behind it, a strategic question formed quietly. Was this about deterrence or preparation for sustained conflict? The movement unfolded in layers. Ground forces moved first. Convoys transported personnel to staging areas where logistics chains began to tighten. At the same time, airborne units accelerated their timeline. Paratroopers prepared for rapid insertion. Main parachutes secured. Reserve chutes locked in place. Weapons carried close, sealed in soft cases. They marched in silence toward waiting C-17 aircraft. Engines running, ramps down. Within minutes, they were airborne. Their role was clear. Arrive first, secure ground. Hold until reinforcements arrive. A classic rapid deployment doctrine. And then, the airpower followed. At a separate airfield, something heavier was preparing. A B-52H Stratofortress sat under floodlights. Massive, silent, loaded with intent. Ground crews moved methodically. Each bomb weighed 2,000 pounds. Mark 84 general-purpose munitions, designed not for precision, but for impact. One by one, they were lifted into position. Internal rotary launcher, external pylons, connections secured, arming systems checked. Inside the crew compartment, the atmosphere was controlled. Checklist after checklist. Oxygen systems verified. Navigation routes confirmed. This mission would not be short. Over 12 hours in the air, and deep penetration into contested airspace. No room for error. Meanwhile, at sea, another element moved. On an aircraft carrier, Marines boarded a CH-53E Super Stallion, heavy-lift helicopter, built for rapid insertion. Rotors unfolded slowly. Engines ignited with a rising mechanical roar. They lifted off into the dark. Their objective was not assault. It was positioning. Forward presence near the Iranian border. And across the region, UH-60 Blackhawks began cycling continuously. Short flights, high frequency. Insert troops, return, repeat. A logistical rhythm that signaled one thing clearly. This was not temporary. Command believed the deployment was controlled, calculated. Then something shifted. Radar systems began tracking increased movement across multiple sectors. Not escalation, response. The assumption had been simple: show force and stabilize the region. But the reality began to diverge. Because in modern conflict, movement triggers movement, and presence invites counter-presence. The turning point came in the air. As the C-17 reached the drop zone, the signal was given. Green light. Paratroopers stood, hooked in, checked lines, and jumped, one after another. Within minutes, the sky filled with descending canopies, silent, controlled, precise. On the ground, they regrouped quickly, secured positions, established perimeter. No resistance. But that wasn't the point. The point was timing. Because by the time conventional forces arrived, the battlefield would already be defined. And then, everything converged. Airborne troops linked up with ground vehicles. Marines secured forward sectors. Helicopter units completed rotations. Heavy equipment followed on secondary flights. Within hours, a fully operational force existed where there had been none. Communications established, supply chains activated, defensive positions fortified. This was not a temporary deployment. This was infrastructure. The numbers tell part of the story. 20,000 troops, multiple airframes deployed, heavy bombers in operational range. But numbers alone do not define impact. What matters is positioning. Forward deployed forces reduce reaction time, increase pressure, and reshape regional calculations. This is not just military movement. This is strategic signaling. And here is where the deeper analysis begins. A leadership that once framed itself as anti-war is now overseeing expanded military posture. The contradiction is visible. Promises of de-escalation replaced by layered deployments. And the result is not stability, it is tension. Because every additional asset in the region creates another variable, another risk point, another potential trigger. The battlefield, in this case, is not defined by combat. It is defined by proximity. How close forces are, how fast they can act, how quickly situations can escalate. This is modern military reality, where deterrence and provocation exist on the same line, and sometimes they become indistinguishable. Anyone observing closely understands something critical. The real question is not what has already happened. It is what happens when one side miscalculates, when a radar lock is misread, when a movement is interpreted as aggression, when timing fails. Because at this scale, mistakes are not small. They are immediate and irreversible. And now the situation stands at a threshold. A fully assembled force, operational, equipped, waiting. Not yet engaged, but no longer distant. So the question remains, not spoken loudly, but understood clearly. Is this still deterrence, or the early stage of something far more difficult to contain?